Hello, Man in Gray here with another Man in Gray book review. Today's book is the Richard Burton Diaries, edited by Chris Williams and published by Yale University Press in 2013. It's 704 pages long. Richard Burton was a Welsh actor who was born in 1925 and who died suddenly in 1984 of a stroke at the age of 58. He was the son of a Welsh coal miner and grew up in poverty, but had this remarkable rise where he became the highest paid actor in the world for a few years in the 1950s. In the early 1950s, Richard Burton was considered one of the great Shakespearean actors. He reached international stardom primarily through the movies. In 1960, though, he came to New York and starred as King Arthur in the musical Camelot, which won him a Tony Award. After that, he starred in the movie Cleopatra with Elizabeth Taylor, and it was during that period that the two of them had an affair, even though both of them were married to other people. And today, Burton is remembered not so much for his acting, but for his turbulent two marriages to Elizabeth Taylor, whose picture is on the back of this diary. Um, and in a way, that's kind of a shame. Also, the conventional wisdom about Burton was that he was a talented actor who wasted his talent doing second-rate movies for money to finance his lavish lifestyle. He owned a yacht that he often lived on. He was always buying expensive jewelry for Taylor. He had his own private jet. He owned a huge villa in Switzerland and owned property all over the world. And he just burned through money constantly. He was also supporting his father and his brothers and sisters. So he had a lot of expenses. He did occasionally make, all the way through his career, he occasionally made a really good movie and did occasionally good performances. But from the 70s up until his death, he became increasingly an alcoholic. In some of his performances, he was so drunk that they had to delay production to dry him out. So he had a lot of personal problems there. In the book, or in the diaries here, though, we see a different version of Burton, one who's you don't get isn't portrayed in the media very often. Burton was a very intelligent man, very thoughtful, and had lots of complexity to him. For one thing, he was a real bookworm. When he wasn't working on a movie, he would read two, sometimes three books a day, and not just short little pop, best-selling novels. He read serious books of history and biography. He loved rugby. That was his big sport. He liked to read books about rugby. And in this diary, he does little short book reviews of some of the books that he read, and he's very insightful. He has some very insightful opinions. He also, from time to time, published newspaper articles and magazine articles on a whole variety of subjects: acting, politics. He got kind of in trouble for writing during the 100th anniversary of Winston Churchill's birth. He wrote an article where he basically trashed Winston Churchill for his racism, especially against the Japanese, which didn't go over well with Churchill's family. But so he was a complicated person and quite intellectual and very, very brilliant. I think a lot of his drinking problems came from the fact that he was easily bored. When he wasn't working or doing something interesting, he would often just drink to try to numb what he called the emptiness of his life. And he blames his drinking in his book for the breakup of his marriage with Taylor. During the last few years of his marriage, he was drunk almost all the time, and he felt that led to their divorce. It seems that Richard Burton was a guy who got bored easily and had to be, stimulated intellectually to keep him off of drinking. One of the things that's kind of ironic about Burton is that he was an actor, a world famous actor, and yet he was rather retiring and reclusive when he wasn't acting, and kind of an introvert. Every time he hated going to parties, and almost every party he mentions in this book, he talks about how bored he is and how dull everybody is. He really had contempt for a lot of Hollywood people. He didn't play the Hollywood game, which is probably why he never won an Academy Award. Richard Burton holds the record of being nominated more times for an Oscar and not winning. He was nominated 7 times for an Academy Award and never won. Um, so he did win a Tony Award for Camelot, and he actually won a Grammy Award for his audio recording of The Little Prince. And he won a Golden Globe and some other awards too. But he never won the big one. He never won the Oscar. And I think a lot of that was due to the fact that he didn't really hobnob with the Academy people. And he was probably some of the most amusing parts of this are his little catty comments about his fellow actors. He dismisses Laurence Olivier and John Gielgud as kind of hammy, old-fashioned actors who were always stagey. He was arguing that the new generation of actors need to be more naturalistic. He admired Marlon Brando and actors like that who were more natural in their acting and less stagey. And he really dismissed a lot of the actors of his generation as being kind of old-fashioned, out of touch. Ironically, also, although Burton was kind of dismissed as a has-been during the last few years of his life, he gave one final great performance. His very last movie, which he filmed in 1983, was of a film version of George Orwell's novel 1984, which starred John Hurt, and Burton played Hurt's antagonist, the villain, a character named O'Brien, who just basically tortures everybody. And the movie came out 3 months after Burton's sudden death. And so Burton never got to see the movie, but he was acclaimed. It was regarded, many critics regarded his performance as O'Brien in 1984 as the best performance he had done in over a decade. So if Burton hadn't died, his career might have revived. We never know. What we do know is that he gave some great performances, and he left behind this fascinating diary of his life. It's not consistent. Most of the diary is from the 10 years from 1965 to 1975. There are some sections from when he was a kid during World War II, and he did write a diary in 1960. Ironically, or interestingly, he hardly ever mentions Camelot. So while he was doing Camelot, he doesn't make much mention of it there. And there are some short entries toward the end of his life. The diary ends in 1983, a year before his death. And it's right at the end of his life that he seemed to find happiness. He married for the 5th time to a woman named Sally Hay, who brought him stability, and he seemed to have cut down on his drinking, but his health he was in terrible health by this point. He was also a heavy smoker. But he seemed to have found some inner peace toward the end of his life, which is a nice thought. So I don't really like to read actor biographies or actor autobiographies very much, or diaries of actors, because they tend to be poorly written and they're almost always self-serving. But this is an exception because Burton was a talented writer, and there's no indication that he ever intended to publish these diaries. He wrote them for himself. The editor suggests that he decided to write to kind of discipline himself, try to get control of himself by writing. You can't write very well when you're drunk, so he did this as a way of kind of himself, but he never intended to write it. So he's much more open and with him and honest about himself than a lot of autobiographies of actors are. So if you're interested in Burton or the glory days of Hollywood, you may be interested in reading the Richard Burton Diaries. It is a little long. I think it's probably too long. This book probably could have been edited down to 400 pages. It would be more interesting. There's a lot of kind of sections that aren't really that interesting, where he talks about the food he was eating and the parties he was going to and so forth. But they wanted to be as inclusive as they could. So the book is The Richard Burton Diaries, edited by Chris Williams. This has been another Man in Gray book review. Thanks for watching.